All right, welcome everyone to our week 13 presentation on persuasive writing. I apologize that I am a little under the weather, so I might sound a little weird, but try to get through it. So this week we're going to start working on our persuasive papers, so I thought it would be appropriate to talk about persuasive writing, what that is, what to expect, and how to get started. So let's go ahead. So what is persuasive writing? Persuasive writing, also known as the argument essay, utilizes logic and reason to show that one idea is more legitimate than another idea. So it attempts to persuade a reader to adopt a certain point of view or to take a particular action. The argument must also use sound reasoning and solid evidence by stating facts, giving logical reasons, using examples, and quoting experts. So with your paper coming up, you are going to choose a controversial issue to talk about, and you're going to try to persuade your audience to agree with you or to do something about it. So this should not just be a controversial activity designed to denigrate the opposition's position. So you're not pointing fingers, you're not going to be hypercritical about an opposing position. Although you will show where they're wrong, we're not meant to put people down and to attack. So the focus of a strong argument should be upon a cohesive explanation of claims, effectively paired with correlating evidence. So you will be using research this week, or not this week, but you will be using research for your persuasive paper. You are required to include at least 3 reputable sources in your paper. We did talk about how to integrate sources in the past, and we will continue to discuss citation and things next week as well. But you will be required to include evidence in the form of research. So how do we choose topics? So of course, this week in the discussion board, I am asking you to do a little debating, and I've given you some examples, but there are lots of others that you can choose from. For this paper, your topic is up to you, but there are some things to consider while you're working on choosing your topic. So one of the things is, of course, I want you to choose something that you are passionate about, an issue that means something to you. So what are you passionate about? What are your interests? What are your beliefs or your lifestyle, things that you are really involved in, that you are passionate about? If you can incorporate that into your argument paper, I think that it will become more interesting to read as a reader, because if you're passionate about it, that passion will be displayed through your writing. Another thing to think about, is your idea debatable? And that's one of the things that I think will be good as we go through the discussion board this week, is determining what your audience thinks about. Is it going to be something that everyone is going to agree with you on? If it's true that everyone agrees with you, then it's not really controversial. So you need to make sure that you find an idea that is debatable. And is it supportable? This is something I think that is very important to keep in mind when we move into an argument. Is your paper or is your topic supportable? A lot of times we start looking at things that are very personal, topics that are maybe spiritual, things that kind of dive into our core belief systems. And although I'm not opposed to reading and debating the ideas of your belief systems and your personal ideas, that's not necessarily the issue. What the issue is it supportable? So if you can only support your point of view based on, for instance, religious texts that would agree with you, that's when we start getting into the realm of if it is supportable with outside research. I'm not saying that any of those religious texts are wrong. What I'm saying is, if you are approaching an audience that does not agree with you, the legitimacy of your religious text may not be something that they are willing to look at. So when you it kind of coincides with the previous question. Is it debatable? And is it supportable? So when you're looking at an issue for your persuasive paper, keep in mind your audience. Will the audience find your support even reliable? And is it just too personal? If it's an idea that is just so personal that it's, or so polarizing that there is no way you're going to actually get someone to come over to your side, that it may be something to avoid. So let's look at some different kinds of topics that you might want to use. So I have a lot here. Some of the ones I've posted in the discussion board this week. So like drug legalization, gay marriage, socialized healthcare, uniforms in schools, violence in the media, interracial marriage, which kind of goes along in a similar idea as gay marriage, lowering the drinking age, creation versus evolution, state-mandated diet regulation, death penalty, spanking, birth control, illegal immigration. So these are all things that are easily debated, right? Things that are definitely have one point of view and another point of view. But there's also questions to consider. Things like, is global climate change man-made? Now, a lot of people would approach climate change and say, yes, obviously the climate is changing, but is it our fault or not? Or is it a natural process? That's debatable. Is our election process fair? Do colleges put too much stock in standardized test scores? That might be something that's very applicable to your audience because you have a class full of people that are looking to go beyond high school and go into college and applying to schools and that kind of stuff. It might be a question to look at. Is torture ever acceptable? Should men get paternity leave from work? Is a lottery a good idea? Do we have fair taxation system? Do curfews keep teens out of trouble? That also might be something that might be applicable to yourself or to your classmates. Are we too dependent on computers? That's one I see a lot of students actually write about, which is interesting considering that we're an online class, that you use computers a lot. Are we too dependent on them? Are parents clueless about child predators on the internet? Should animals be used for research? Should cigarette smoking be banned? I know that there's several cities in Missouri that actually have banned smoking in all public establishments. So that's interesting to look at. Are cell phones dangerous? Are law enforcement cameras an invasion of privacy? So those are lots of different topics to consider. Now, I haven't put every topic you could possibly look at up here on the board. That's going to very much depend on you. But are there topics to avoid? And it kind of goes back to that idea of, is it so polarizing that you're never going to persuade someone to agree with you? Or is it so personal or private of a topic that it's going to be hard to debate? So things like, I know that abortion is an issue that I've deliberately not put on the board because, first of all, I've probably read hundreds of abortion papers, so I think that I've read enough. So that's one of the reasons why I did put it out there. But the other idea is that abortion is such a polarizing topic that it's very difficult to persuade someone from one side to move to the other side because it is so steeped in our own personal beliefs and ethics, and it is such a polarizing topic that it's one it's difficult to actually accomplish anything with the argument. There might be some up here that I've already listed that might be in that idea of too polarizing, such as gay marriage. That's a very hot topic right now, especially with the Supreme Court and that kind of stuff. So that might be an issue that some of you might want to avoid. I'm not saying you can't write about it, but it may be one of those issues that is so polarizing that it would be hard to persuade someone to agree with you on. But keep in mind, the questions in the previous slide, are you passionate about it? Is your idea debatable? And is your idea supportable? It doesn't have to just be about being too personal with supportable. Can you actually find research on your topic? Doing some preliminary research, just doing a quick Google search or something like that, could help you understand if you're going to be able to find sources for this topic or not. So that's something to keep in mind. But these questions: are you passionate about the topic? Is your idea debatable? Is your idea supportable? Those are things to keep in mind when you're trying to choose a topic for a persuasive essay. So once you've chosen your topic, we want to look at how do you approach your audience. This will be important this week, especially in the discussion board, when we start to present our ideas. There's a couple of different things to keep in mind. You should know your audience. So for our paper's sake, the class is your audience. I am your audience. So that should help you in understanding your audience. So this week, when you start looking at what people believe about different issues, what they're passionate about, in terms of the list that I provided, that can help you understand your audience, their interests, their needs, their opinions. And I also invite you, we'll talk more about your topics next week as you get into it, but you are more than welcome to post to the discussion board, class, this is my topic that I'm thinking about. What do you think? So although in the initial post of the discussion board, I'm asking you to choose from the list that I posted this week, I am happy to allow you to have a separate post that's just kind of a post to feel out your classmates on what they think about your possible topics. So that's just something to put out there. It wouldn't be part of the graded initial discussion board post, but it could help you in terms of getting to know your audience. Understand what your audience's beliefs are. How are those beliefs different than yours? And understand how they're similar. How do people agree with you, or how are they similar in their ideas? And then when you approach your audience, you also want to utilize persuasive language as we move into writing the paper. Things like you're going to refute the opposing argument. And I don't want you to name call or attack the opposition, but you're going to have to know what the opposition thinks. So if you know what the opposition thinks, then you can show how what they think is incorrect according to your research, according to your ideas. Question your reader's thinking with thought-provoking and leading questions. You can actually address the audience in a persuasive paper. With the literary analysis, I asked you to try to remove yourself, remove first-person perspective, and remove that second-person perspective as much as possible, which creates a more formal kind of paper. But for a persuasive essay, you can directly ask your reader questions and get them thinking about your topic. You can call your reader to action. Ask them to do something about your topic. I had a particular persuasive essay written. It was very early in my teaching career, maybe my first or second year. And I had a student that wrote his paper about organ donation. So he wrote a paper that he was very passionate about it, and it was a very thought-provoking paper. I probably would say it's in the top 5 greatest papers I've had from students. And what he did is first of all, he told a personal story about someone he knew that died because they could not get an organ transplant, which was very heart-wrenching. So it shared that personal story, got the reader to connect to the topic, and then he went through every opposing idea that people generally come up with when they say they're not going to become organ donors. The doctors wouldn't try to save me, that kind of stuff, and went through all those ideas that people have when they are concerned about organ donation. He showed how those things are wrong. So he used evidence, used research, and showed how all of those ideas are false concepts. False, 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 false. And then at the very end of the paper, he's calling the reader to action, saying that you need to do something about this topic. And then the amazing part, and I think the most effective part of the paper, was that he actually, and this was in a live classroom, so it wouldn't quite work with our type of classroom, but he actually stapled to his paper and gave every classmate a copy of the paper, the organ donation paper to fill out and send in to say that you're going to become an organ donor. So he actually put it right there in the physical. You have no excuses. Here it is. Fill it out, turn it in. So it was very effective, and he was actually calling the reader to action, saying this is what you need to do. So it was very effective. So you can ask the reader to make a decision. So beyond just arguing your point of view, you can ask your reader to decide to come to your side. So don't just leave it at, okay, that's what I believe and that's it. But actually, reach through the paper and ask your reader to do something, to make a decision about the topic. And then other things on the approach to an audience, determine if your audience is hostile. And I think the discussion board is going to be very important in this element. You can already, probably in terms of myself, I'm going to approach all of your papers with the same kind of eye that I've approached with other papers, but I may or may not disagree. I'm not really going to express that. And so you know that I'm more objective. But with that said, thinking of your classmates as your audience, you may find that you have an audience that is hostile to your ideas, that is opposing, more than agreeing with you. And like I said before, if all of your audience agrees with you, there's really not a debate to have. So I'm not looking for papers where everyone agrees with you. So you need to determine that with your audience. But if you have like you against the world kind of topic where everyone disagrees, that's called a hostile audience. And there are some specific ways that you can actually organize your paper to address a hostile audience. So one of the things that you want to think about when you are writing a paper to people that do not agree with you is to present some common ground. So you are setting the stage with someone in your audience that you both can agree on one point. So you don't start in a defensive mode, like with your fists up, ready to fight, because you are not going to persuade someone when you have your fists up. There's just no way. They may say they agree with you because they don't want to fight, but that is not how to approach someone and actually get them to think about your topic. So don't be defensive right away, but instead start your paper by presenting some common ground. Concentrate on points that you can all agree with. Let your audience feel comfortable with you, and then guide them through a journey in your essay. So don't lose their trust. Don't put your fists up right away, because you're not ever going to gain ground with them, because they're going to automatically shut off and say, I'm not listening to anything this person says, because you're automatically defensive. So present some common ground to your audience. After that is established, then present your thesis statement. So, hey, these are the points that we agree on, but there's something that we don't agree on, and I'm going to tell you what it is and why. So you've already made the effort to identify with them, to connect with your audience, to show respect to your audience, and then they will respect you for your efforts. So you're connecting with them. They're going to say, okay, so maybe we don't agree on something. I'm willing to listen. And then you can encourage them to follow your thinking through that kind of language. After you have established common ground, you present your opposing view in a respectful way. Then you can convince your audience to agree with you by presenting solid evidence. So the core of your argument when you look at trying to persuade a hostile audience, it should come in two phases. So the things that you believe, but your audience may disagree with you on, and then a rebuttal to their disagreements. So it needs to have two things. It needs to present your point of view, and then it also needs to refute or bring a rebuttal to their point of view. So you need to research the arguments of your opposition. And you can use things like examples. You can use experience. So I'm not saying you can't personalize it. And you'll need to use research for sure. So give your audience respect and you will more likely win their support. And then finally conclude your essay by reminding the audience that you agree and that there's something that you disagree on. And restate your thesis statement in a new way and sum up your supporting points. And then you can address them with questions, with an idea for them to change their mind, offering an action that they could take, that kind of stuff. So things to avoid with a persuasive paper. So being too personal. Now, I'm not saying you can't use personal experience. An emotional appeal is actually an effective way to address an audience. If you look back on political speeches, you will always see some sort of personal element, whether it's a personal story that the speaker had presented from their own life or presenting a personal story from someone else. It's always there. So an emotional appeal is okay to use, but it should not be the entire argument. So if the entire thing is personal, I believe this, I think this, then it just, okay, that's nice that you think that, but it doesn't matter. Don't accuse the audience. So we're not going to point fingers, we're not calling names, we're not being accusatory. Don't use derogatory language like your point of view is dumb. This happens a lot in political debates. Those Democrats are ridiculous or the Republicans are greedy. Those are derogatory things. Those are name calling. We're going to avoid that. And like I mentioned before, try to avoid choosing a topic that's too divisive to argue effectively. If it is so polarizing, you're not going to persuade someone to come to your side. It's just really a difficult place to put yourself in. So try to avoid that. So things to keep in mind this week. The discussion board this week is meant as practice. So be aware of your classmates' feelings. Approach them with respect and you will get respect in return. You should start to solidify what topic you have in mind. You will need it by next week. So this week's kind of brainstorming time. You can present different ideas to your classmates in the discussion board, but you need to have a solidified idea by next week. We will turn in a rough draft for this paper. So not just in the discussion board, you are actually turning it in for a grade. And so I suggest you get started working toward your paper. It's due, I believe, at the end of week 15. Is that? Oh, golly. November 22nd is when it's due. Our last vocabulary quiz is next week. So we have list 8 will be next week. And keep in mind that our final exam that happens during finals week will be a comprehensive vocabulary exam. So if you want to start studying, which I do always suggest, you should utilize the lists that we have in our course documents. So vocabulary list 1 through 7, and then we'll have another one next week. So start reviewing those, getting ready for that comprehensive exam. And as always, please feel free to contact me with any questions. And I really look forward to this week. I think that it is a great opportunity to see different points of view. Also, I wanted to point out that in course documents, there is a handout about workshopping. If you haven't taken a look at that, that might be something to check out this week. Not saying that we are workshopping a draft, but it kind of gives you a good perspective on how to approach your classmates. So that's something to look at as well. So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to our discussion. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.